Have you ever been in a situation where you unexpectedly needed to put up some emergency shelter for animals? Doesn't matter what the animals are. You just needed to get some emergency shelter up. In my case, I've had multiple occasions where I've needed very quickly shelter for goats. And I've tried several things over the years, each one different. And I thought I would show you photos that I took at the time of emergency shelters. They all were temporary and they all worked. Let me give you some ideas. Back in 2011, November specifically, a goat showed up at my place one day, and I eventually named her Lawnmower once I was quite certain that she didn't belong to anybody else, that she had been dumped. Well, the only fence I had at the time was this garden fence. It had been built in 2011, I think like March, February. It was right before growing season started. That was what I had asked the guy who put it in, that I wanted it before growing season. And he got it in. And I had a nice garden here that summer. And I was actually wanting to borrow some goats to clean it out because I'm lazy. I don't like weeding. Well, then one Friday evening, out of the blue, a goat walked by. The guess was that she was born that March or April, not really sure, but she was young. But the people who knew about goats, which at the time I didn't, said that she was probably a March or April baby. Well, I looked out the kitchen window. I saw this goat. I ran out and I managed to get her to follow me. She wouldn't let me catch her. Had no identification of any kind, but I managed to get her to come into the only fenced area I had. Here, my garden. Well then, by December, I had named her Lawnmower. She was mine. Nobody had claimed her. And then the weather report came on. We were in, I don't remember the specifics. I can't remember if it was freezing rain, sleet. I think it was one of those two, but it was going to be in the 20s and there was going to be precipitation. This is a vegetable garden. I had no shelter. Now I've looked for photos. I did lose a bunch one year when my laptop failed. But a friend came and he helped me build a temporary shelter. Now this was built differently. It was 2 levels, but it was basically this floor plan. Two levels, but it was basically this floor plan. And what we did is on this fence here, we strung a tarp. And then on that fence there, we strung a tarp. Might have been the same tarp for both areas. I can't remember now. But the previous owner of this place had tall cedar branches that he had positioned around to dry them. And they were all like in a teepee shape, but just the branches. So they were all drying. And they'd been here for years. Well, we took a few, I think we took 3 of them. And we tied one there and we had them angled like a teepee or a tent. And we put another top so that Lawnmower was able to go into the shelter in this direction. And she had shelter from the wind that and elements that way, and on this side as an angle. And Lawnmower used it. She stayed in here, and I eventually got a few more baby goats. But I think it was like June before we finished the fencing for that area. So she was in here for a long time, and that was the only shelter they had. At first just her. And then when I got some baby goats, they'd all be in there. And even after the shelter was taken, every time I bring goats in here, they all for some reason, they like this corner. It's only a few inches elevated, but they'll like this corner. Often now, they go in here too, but this is still a popular corner. But all I used was some poles, cedar poles, and tarps, and twine to tie it to the fence. That's all this shelter was. And of course, a little bit of an elevation, so if it got flooded out here, they weren't, they had a place to get away from water. That's all it was. It was an emergency shelter, and it worked. So tarps can come in handy when you need emergency shelter for a goat or other animals. It doesn't have to be goats, sheep, birds. If I had to make an emergency shelter right now for chickens or ducks or geese or whatever, that would work. They would be able to get out of the elements if they so desired. Now, last year, it was December of 2020, I believe. Friend brought goats. She was moving. She needed a place to move her goats. And so the first thing we did, and I said they could come in here. They could live in here for a while. The first thing we did is we took cattle panels. Or actually hog panels, just two of them, very sturdy. Tied them to the fence, tied them together, and I do have photos of this because we put a tarp over it, actually 2 tarps. Covered it in tarps. For a while, that was the goats' only shelter. And then we had babies born. Her goats were pregnant, and I wasn't really sure that because we had multiple goats, including a buck in here, I was concerned about the babies having a place to escape. And so we built this contraption. Part of it is stuff I had. I had this roof from a table that had been built to cover up a water trough. It had fallen to pieces. We put that up there. She brought what do you call these? I'm blanking out now. You know what these are. We just put them together. Laid one down on the ground so they could get off the ground if necessary. There's some rocks and stuff down here. We also had a table she had for the goats to play on, put there. And the goats did use this. Not as much as the other shelter, but they did use this. This plastic was put here temporarily. I just did that a couple weeks ago. But what I'm saying is, pallets. You can take pallets, put them together real quick. Had these boards just lying around. Put them to use. In fact, some of them are rotting. I mean, this is just a temporary. It's got to come out by before spring. I need to start working on this. But it was a temporary shelter. Oh, we actually put a tarp over it. I got a tarp and put over the entire thing so that there would be more, when it was going to rain, so that adults or babies would have a place to get out of the elements. So those are 3 temporary
Back in
shelters
2012 or 2013, can't remember for sure, I needed to separate a whole bunch of bucklings, young kids, but they were old enough to get the does pregnant. So I needed to separate them, and the only place I could do that was in the garden. They were all for sale at the time. So what I did was I took a whole bunch of straw bales, and basically I made a shelter. I put a piece of plywood on top, used straw bales to keep it in place so it wouldn't blow away. But I basically made a straw bale shelter. Of course, being goats, they ate it. But it did last through the winter. It was a successful shelter. I never put any cob or anything on the outside to protect the straw bales. I simply stacked them up like bricks, put plywood on the top, and then another few straw bales to keep the wind from blowing the plywood away, and called it a day. I did make an opening and then blocked off the other part so that to keep the heat in, and it worked quite well. The roof of the shelter actually became a wonderful play area. The kids would jump on it and play and have all sorts of fun. And when the weather got bad, they'd go back into the shelter and stay there or stay there at night. It worked really great. It only lasted that one winter, but that's all I needed. I eventually was able to sell them all and return the garden, use it as an actual garden that summer. I just needed the straw bales during the winter. My last suggestion is dog houses. I have one the previous neighbors built and left here, and then I have two that I got used for very cheap. One, just a little plastic dog house, um, fits a medium sized dog, I guess. It's not that big. And then another one that was an igloo. I found, I believe it was like 20 bucks. It was out of one of those
Lawnmower.
places that sells used appliances, and it was just outside with a bunch of other stuff. Just asked how much, and I took it home. The other doghouse I found on Facebook. But what I'm saying is, these lightweight kind of doghouses can be moved from place to place. I have moved the igloo between the two different paddocks wherever it's needed. So keep an open mind. If you see a doghouse that's a decent size, pick it up. It could be useful to you. Even if you don't need it that day, in the future, you might be glad to have it. I have found baby goats love to hide in the igloo. If I can't find baby goats, I'm talking like the first few weeks of age, I will go look in the igloo, and that's usually where they're hiding. But keep your mind open. Look around at what you have available. When you're in need of a quick shelter, uh, some boards that you have lying around, metal roofing you have lying around, a quick trip to the store if necessary to pick up a couple tarps. Just let your mind be creative. And I'm sure in a pinch, you can build a quick temporary shelter for your animals, whether those animals are goats or waterfowl or chickens or something else. In a pinch, anything can be an emergency shelter. Hope all this helped, and I want to thank you for watching. If you like the content, please hit the thumbs up button. If you're not subscribed, I ask you to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. And I thank you for staying tuned and watching to the end. And I hope you have a wonderful, blessed day.